Remember in my last video that I mentioned the nerd for a brief moment, and I had the idea to cover him? Well, I'm doing it now, and this won't be the last that someone else will do it, but that doesn't mean I'm willing to try. And as someone who actually watched the nerd when I was younger, something clicked with me, and I kept watching his videos, and over the years, as the AVGN evolved, I became a fan of his work. And while there are other channels that do a better job than what I could ever do of covering alternate history, that doesn't mean I'm willing to try. And for this case, I'm willing to do it. And I hope you like what I have to say in this video. Enjoy. The Angry Video Game Nerd, one of the most iconic YouTubers of his time. When I first discovered his channel, it felt raw, original, and unapologetic, passionate. His rants, his VHS era aesthetic, his love-hate relationship with retro games, it all clicked. But today I want to explore a wild alternate timeline. One if the nerd never existed. No AVGN, no angry rants, no retro game revival, just a silence where there should have been chaos. Before James Rolfe became the nerd, he was a local filmmaker in New Jersey. His early works included short horror films, quirky sketches, were sketched among friends, some posted to his personal website. Then came the infamous VHS tapes, the 5-minute rant about Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. These weren't just reviews, they were caricatures, explorations of frustrations, humor, and nostalgia. Thanks to his friend Mike, those tapes were made their way into YouTube. And when his Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles videos blew up, the nerd was born. From there, it was a snowball effect. He released a full-blown AVGN movie in 2014. He had built up a cult following that turned the obscure NES titles into collector's items and shaped retro gaming culture for decades. Rolf's style wasn't just angry, it was authentic. He researched each game, but built skits around them and created a comedic persona that resonated with gamers and non-gamers alike. Now, let's flip the switch. Imagine James never picked up a controller. Instead, he stuck to filmmaking, indie horror, experimental shorts, maybe a few entry festivals. In his timeline, he's known as a niche director with a loyal but small fanbase. His YouTube channel features airy, low-budget horror films, not game reviews. He is praised for his creativity but never reaches the mainstream fame. Retro gaming remains a quiet corner of the internet, not a booming subculture. Without the nerd's influence, games like Silver Surfer, Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, and Action 52 fade into obscurity. Prices for retro games stay low, with a few collectors chasing nostalgia. Lost media becomes truly lost. No one digs through the bargain bins for forgotten cartridges. His absence would also mean no AVGN-inspired game releases, like the upcoming Angry Video Game Nerd 8-bit platformer launching in 2025. Now, let's address the idea that someone else have taken the nerd's place. It's tempting to imagine that if James Rolfe hadn't stepped into the spotlight, another creator would have filled the gap. But that's not how it works. The Angry Video Game Nerd isn't a format. It's a force. James didn't just invent a character. He shaped a cultural moment. He blended a raw frustration, cinematic flair, and a deep gaming knowledge to create something that can't be replicated. So the question is this: who's going to mimic the AVGN in this alternate timeline? Well, we actually came close to having one. His name is Chris. Now, who is Chris? In our timeline, Chris, known as the Irate Gamer, was often accused of copying the AVGN style, and even in this alternate reality where James never becomes the nerd, Chris doesn't inherit that mantle. He still might make videos, he might still gain a following, but he doesn't define the genre. He doesn't ignite the same passion. He doesn't build the same legacy. The nerd isn't a title wanting to be claimed. It's a persona forged by Rolfe's unique voice and vision. Without James, that void stays empty. I also forgot to mention is that YouTube back then really didn't like the AVGN because he was often a lot more politically incorrect, as they say nowadays. So that's why the Irate Gamer, or TIG, became popular, because YouTube recommended him over James Rolfe, which of course over time his fan base would attack him because he was a watered down version of the nerd, even though he would sometimes do his own thing here and there and would even come out first before the nerd. But that doesn't mean that he was excused, or in this case a copycat for the nerd. And in reality, James Rolfe and Chris were actually neutral, and they didn't really hate each other. But the fan base certainly made it out to be in that case. Or maybe that's just speculative, who knows. That doesn't mean the Irate Gamer, or TIG for short, can become the nerd. It's just that the meaning behind it will significantly be different compared to what we think of the nerd in this alternate timeline, as the nerd itself was created by Rolf, but because he doesn't exist in this alternate timeline, Chris, by comparison, definition of the nerd would be very different, and as a result, people would come to associate him as the nerd, but not James Rolfe in this alternate timeline. While in our timeline, the AVGN's videos had been in decline in terms of quality in here and there, this would also apply to the same thing to Tig as well. As his channels become more popular, he would eventually need to simply find partners in order to maintain his channel, resulting in the same outcome as the AVGN. The only difference is that because his videos were already in low production, this would mean nothing much would change, but that doesn't mean people would notice it. The absence of the AVGN doesn't just affect one channel, it reshapes the entire ecosystem. Doug Walker, also known as the Nostalgia Critic, might still rise, but without the nerd's momentum, his reach could be smaller. Scott the Woz, Gaming Historian, GameSec, My Life in Gaming, all of these careers might emerge later or with less traction, as retro gaming itself might not explode until the mid-2010s. Delayed by a lack of early hype. Indie games like Shovel Knight or Undertale might struggle to find an audience without the retro revival. Even the AVGN-inspired game wouldn't exist. No pixelated nerd, no swear levels, no angry power-ups, etc. This would cause AAA games to become more profitable in this alternate timeline, but it would eventually suffer the same fate as we are currently living in our timeline. So what does this alternate timeline teach us? Timing matters. Influence matters. One creator can shift an entire genre. James Rolfe didn't just review games, he resurrected them. He gave voice to frustration, nostalgia, and joy. Without him, the landscape of YouTube and retro gaming would be vastly different. And while this video was speculative, it's also a tribute to the power of passion, creativity, and being just angry enough to make something unforgivable. Thank you for watching the video and how far I went to making these videos. Until next time, see you later and have a wonderful day. Oh, right, the Direct. The Direct is coming out on September 12th. I hope to cover it and give my thoughts on it and what games I would be personally interested in. Thank you.